inflation is at a 4-decade high, and rising prices at grocery stores and gas stations are hitting Americans so hard. With 6 months to go until the November elections, the midterms, of course, the administration is trying to shift its messaging on inflation and the economy. Earlier this week, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen admitted on CNN that a year ago she was incorrect when she said inflation would be, quote, transitory. She told the network, quote, "I think I was wrong then about the path that inflation would take." All that said, there is, I should say, some good news. The May jobs report was better than expected, despite fears of an economic slowdown. Joining us now to discuss the state of the economy is Amara Omokwe. She is an economics reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start off with just where we are. You're an economics reporter. I'm so happy you're here because we really need an economics reporter to break this all down for us. Jamie Dimon is saying, who is, of course, I should tell people, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He's saying that there's going to be an economic hurricane. Mothers, of course, aren't being able to find baby formula, but we also have this jobs report that looks better. So let's break down sort of where we are in the state of the economy and the horizon.
Well, the state of the economy is really sort of in a delicate place, right? There are a lot of bright spots. If you look at where we are in the labor market, for instance, we had a pretty solid jobs report today. If you look at where household balance sheets are, those are some of the positive signs in the economy. But of course, we have inflation, which, as you mentioned, is at a 4-decade high. It's really hitting families hard. And if you look at polling data and consumer sentiment data, Americans are really concerned about all these higher prices that they're seeing at the grocery store, at gas pumps. Like, it's a big problem for a lot of Americans. And then you also have the Federal Reserve, which is mounting this very aggressive campaign to lower inflation. They're raising interest rates. They're shrinking the size of their balance sheet. They're basically trying to tap the brakes on the economy. And that is what is giving corporate leaders and economists some pause. The fear is that the Federal Reserve won't be able to bring down inflation without launching us into a recession, basically, a really significant slowdown. So I think people are hopeful that hopefully, the Federal Reserve will be able to do it. But there is some fear among some that they won't be able to. And that's sort of a big headwind and a big question mark for the economy in the months to come.
And another big question, Amara, is what can President Biden actually do? There have been so many presidents, all the way from LBJ to Nixon to all these other presidents who tried to deal with inflation and failed. How much can he really impact the economy on his policies and his messaging?
Well, I mean, he's trying. The administration is trying. You saw them this week say that they're going to be engaging in sort of this month-long campaign during the month of June to speak to Americans about the economy, to try and reassure Americans that they have a plan to fight inflation. But if you talk to pretty much any economist, they will say, look, the president really can't do much. His administration really can't do much. Really, the most powerful player here is the Fed. And we just sort of have to wait for the Fed to make its move and see how those moves work through the system. But at the same time, from a political standpoint, it's basically impossible for the president and his administration to say, look, this is the Fed's responsibility. We're not going to do anything about it. So you do see them trying to reset on their messaging. You do see them talking about some of the things that they're trying to do, whether that be, a release from the energy reserves or trying to push Congress to pass some of President Biden's economic agenda. But if you talk to economists, they say those sorts of things really don't move the needle on inflation, particularly in the short term.
And Annie, this week began with President Biden writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal calling on Congress to pass things like a clean energy tax credit or investments in tax reform. How much is Congress and really his fellow Democrats, how much are they interested in some of the things that the president's talking about?
There's a lot going on.
I love this answer, by the way.
I do think it's interesting that Biden has spent the week kind of tacking into, they have been trying for months being more optimistic about the inflation and the economy than the reality has been. And with Yellen saying she was wrong and the administration now trying to kind of tack and not, they have positive economic indicators like the jobs numbers that they've been trying to highlight, but now they're trying to really show that they're taking inflation issues more seriously. June is going to be an interesting month between the Roe decision coming out of the Supreme Court, gun vote in Congress, the January 6th hearings, this is going to be a big month for Democrats to try and convince voters that this is not just a referendum on the president and on Congress and Democrats in control of Congress, that this is a choice election, and that like this is a big month where like that will either happen or it won't.
Yeah. I was going to ask, Eugene, I want to ask you about sort of the challenges facing, but I have to, of course, ask you about Janet Yellen and her saying that she is wrong. What was going on there? Because she fell on her sword.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was something that we don't often hear, especially from this administration, because when you think about when inflation first started becoming evident, Jen Psaki, who was the press secretary at the time, kind of scoffed at the idea that it was going to stick around for a long time. And what they kept using and saying was that it was going to be transitory, which means it's not going to be around very long. That feels a lot different now, right? And so Janet Yellen going back and saying, you know, I was wrong on this. That is something that was brought up to the current press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, this week. And basically like, were you guys wrong? And will you say that as well? And she was like, no, we're not. She just kept moving, you know, kind of moving on and not saying that. But when you talk to the American people about this, what they've said is the whole time we felt like they weren't taking it seriously enough. President Biden was going out and he was giving speeches, telling people, I feel your pain. But he kept talking about those economic indicators that you were just talking about that are good for this administration and for the country. But people weren't hearing that when their milk was expensive, when gas was going up. And now you have this issue of infant formula not being able to come to mothers and not being on shelves. So they're not feeling the same thing.
There are so many challenges. And Mara, I want to get your sense of what you thought about Janet Yellen's comments. And also, you told our producers that people sort of just feel sour right now around the country. So weigh in on sort of Janet Yellen's statements and how the way that people are feeling is also part of this.
Well, yeah, I agree with Eugene. It was sort of a rare moment of candor from the Treasury Secretary that you don't often hear from administration officials. But I think what you also heard her doing there is trying to explain why we have the inflation that we have right now. You know, in those same comments, she said there were circumstances that couldn't have been foreseen last year that caused supply shocks to the economy that basically helped drive the inflation that we're seeing right now. And what I sort of heard her saying is basically like a pushback to the criticism that Republicans have been constantly launching at this administration, that it was actually their policies that fuel the inflation that we're seeing right now. What you hear her and other administration officials often doing is saying, look, there are a lot of reasons that we have inflation. Inflation is a global problem. We have these supply chain issues. So they're really trying to push back on that criticism from Republicans. Whether, you know, all of this messaging resonates with voters and breaks through with voters, that just remains to be seen. As others on the panel said, the administration has been messaging on inflation for months, and we still see that in polling data and consumer sentiment data. People pretty much aren't buying it. They feel bad about where the economy is now. They feel bad about the outlook for the economy in months to come. So this really is a difficult position for the administration to find itself in.
And Eugene, going back to Annie's great point about just the confluence of challenge that this White House faces. Take us a little bit into how they're prioritizing, what they're dealing with, and just the overall mood in there. Because when I talk to folks, they sound like they're overwhelmed, but they also sound like, yes, this is what a White House has to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah, the mood is sour. It's sour outside in the country, and it's sour in the White House because there's so much going on. And the biggest problem, and we've been talking about this entire show, is that there's not much the White House can do for some of these issues on inflation, on guns, on all some of these things that the American people want them to do. There's not much for them to do. So
and they also said, I should also say that aides also said that they didn't tell President Biden about the baby formula issue until April. They're also walking back some of his statements on Taiwan. There's just sort of this frustration, it seems like.
Yeah, there's like a flurry of kind of what seems like and feels like missteps, right? Especially when you talk to the administration, you say, why wasn't the president briefed on baby infant formula when the people who make it knew that the closing of the Abbott facility was going to be an issue immediately? Why didn't he know? And that's one of the many things that they're dealing with. And it is, you know, the White Houses are hard. Running the country is very difficult. And at a time when people are feeling how they're feeling, this administration feels like they don't have a lot of things that they can do, but they're pushing forward. They talk about chewing gum and walking at the same time.
Yeah, well, a lot of challenges to deal with. Thank you so much to Amara, Eugene, and Annie for joining us and for sharing your reporting.